Welcome to the Creative Force Podcast, a podcast all about empowering you to live in your God-given identity and go after the dreams in your heart. I'm your host, Sharon Stark, and every week we'll be having powerful conversations that will combine practical and biblical wisdom for living your purpose. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Creative Force Podcast. I'm here today with Rachelle Putt. Rachelle is a registered tax preparer and she actually does my taxes. And I'm just so excited to have her on the show here today just so we can all learn from her and really understand taxes better. Welcome to the show, Rachelle. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This is exciting because I love to talk taxes. I've been a registered tax preparer with IRS since 1991. And it was a business that God gave me so I can be home with my kids. And my kids are obviously growing and on their own, and I still love being at home working. So, and it's a business that God gave me that I can take anywhere and do whatever He wants me to do. So there was more to it than I was asking for. So, yes, and I've learned a lot in the last 30 years. So.
I love that. That's awesome that God gave you this opportunity to do this and to really also meet the desire of your heart to be home with your kids. That's awesome. Can you just start us off for all of the people who have LLCs and are small business owners? Can you just start us off kind of explaining the basics of how taxes work specifically for LLCs compared to other business structures?
Okay. Well, so there's 4 business structures. And my advice to people is to start off with the structure 1 and then move up to structure 2 and then 3 and 4 as your business grows. Okay. A lot of people start off right at the top and they spend a lot of money and then it doesn't work out and they've wasted a lot of money. Okay. So my recommendation, so you start off as a sole proprietor, which is you just own the business yourself. It goes on a Schedule C on your tax return and you pay a 15% self-employment tax on it. LLC is the next step up, which is a limited liability corporation. And mainly you want an LLC if you know the business is starting to take off and you want protection. That's what the LLC mostly does, is protect you. It's about the same on tax wise as a sole proprietor. You're still going to pay your 15% self-employment tax, but you do get to write off a little bit more. And each step you get to write off more. There's more benefits and more benefits.
Okay. That's good to know.
But as your business grows, you're going to have more opportunities for, growth and other benefits that you want to do for yourself and for your employees. I recommend starting off as a sole proprietor, see if it's going to take off, then get your LLC. And basically a sole proprietor and LLC both go on the Schedule C, or you can file your own LLC, but you still have your self-employment tax issue. If you want to get away from the self-employment tax and your business is growing even more, that's when you want to move up to an S Corp, which it's a pass-through entity. It still goes onto your personal tax return, but it files its own tax return, and that's even more protection. The higher up of the business structure, the more protection you have, and mainly the protection you want is from being sued or something went wrong. It doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, it could be bad. And so you just want your protection, because then they can only go after that business. They can't go after everything you have. That's the protection that you want.
Okay, that's really cool to hear, like, the differences in the different structures. So can you tell us, like, what are the tax advantages specifically for having an LLC? Or, are there tax advantages for having a sole proprietorship, or is that on your personal tax record?
Okay, so they both go on your personal tax record.
Yes.
It's just the LLC gives you protection so that nobody can go after you if something was to happen. That's mostly the, as far as taxes.
Okay.
You are protected. You just have a legal protection there where they can't take everything from you for the rest of your life if something bad was to happen. That's the main thing. But as far as a sole proprietor and LLC, the tax advantages are the same.
Okay. That's interesting to know. So what exactly are those tax advantages?
Well, like we were speaking earlier about a IRA.
Yeah.
So if you're just a sole proprietor, you can only put money into a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA.
Okay.
And then you can only write off the traditional IRA. You can't with the Roth. With the LLC, you could put money into what they call a SEP IRA, which is it's for a business, and it could be for a regular or for a Roth, and you'll be able to write that off on your with your LLC. So it's just a step higher. It's just a better write off.
Yeah. Okay. So with an LLC, then you're saying that people can invest their money into the self-employed IRA and then they're
Mhm.
able to actually write that money off at the end of the year.
Yes, yeah, and you can put into your SEP IRA up to 25% of your net earnings.
Yeah.
Whereas with the sole proprietor, the maximum amount is $6,000. It doesn't matter how much you made.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a really big deal to be able, if you can write off all of that money, putting that into a SEP IRA. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And what are some of like, I guess the tax obligations? Because you started to mention it. You said that people have to pay 15% self-employment tax. So what are some of like the other tax obligations maybe that small business owners should be aware of?
Okay. So the 15% self-employment tax is your Social Security tax. It goes into your Social Security account.
Okay.
Normally, when you're an employee, they take out Social Security tax 7.5%, and your
Yeah.
employer matches 7.5%.
Yeah.
But because you're your own employer, you pay the full 15%. But that money is also put aside for when you retire and
Okay.
receive Social Security. So, and then you have your regular income tax, depending on what tax bracket you're at, in addition to that 15%. Now, there's all kinds of different taxes when you have a business, depending on what kind of business you have. So, like
Hmm.
if you have sales, then you got sales tax, and you got
Yeah.
county tax, and you got city tax, and you have to, and it's all different. Every county and city have their own rules. So you have to do your due diligence. And they're usually pretty helpful because they want to collect that money. And basically, what you're doing, those kind of taxes, is you're collecting those taxes for them and then giving it to them.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll set the guidelines. They'll say it's a certain percentage of this kind of product. This kind of product is this percentage. Make sure you collect this much above what you are selling it for.
Okay. I guess it could seem a little overwhelming for people who are not selling products, but maybe they're a service-based entrepreneur. Is there anything that they should know specifically?
So the service base is probably the easiest because,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's the hardest too because
Okay.
it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears when it comes to service.
That's true.
But yes, but it's also rewarding. To me, it's more rewarding because you've given something of yourself and you're able to provide a service.
Yeah.
But there's no extra tax for the service.
Okay. That's good to know. Because technically, you would be considered a service-based entrepreneur as well, too, with your tax business.
Correct.
So, what are, I guess, some of the common tax deductions that people should be aware of as small business owners?
Okay, so every business is a little bit different, but the
Mm-hmm.
basic categories are the same. So you
Okay.
have your auto expenses where you can either do your mileage or you can do actual expenses. And
Mm.
even if you do actual expenses, you have to give them your mileage because they want to separate personal from business.
Okay.
And 90% of the time, mileage is more than actual expenses. And it's the easiest to keep track of. They have so many apps out right now that can keep track of your mileage.
Oh, that's
Um,
good to know.
yeah, that's probably the easiest. Then you have your taxes and license that you can write off. You have your office you can write off. If you run your office out of your house, you can take a office and home deduction. And it doesn't have to be a full room. It could be just the corner of your bedroom if that's where you have your computer or your office set up. But what you would have to do is get the square footage of that office space
Mm-hmm.
and then the square footage of the house, and you get a
Mm-hmm.
percentage. And then that's the
Okay.
percentage you can write off all your rent, your mortgage, your utilities, lawn care. If you have somebody in your house, you get to write off percentage of that. Anything that's in that house, you get to write off that percentage for that home office. Now,
That's awesome.
years ago, IRS used to pick on that, but they don't anymore because everybody works from home.
Yeah, a lot of
Not
remote workers
everybody, but
now.
a lot of people do. Mostly people work from home,
Yeah.
and as long as you have a picture of that office, that's all the proof that they would ask for.
Okay, good to know. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that right off and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." What are some of the common misconceptions that you hear in regards to taxes and being a small business owner?
I think a lot of them, a lot of misconceptions that just because they're a small business owner that they can do whatever they want.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
probably they think they can do whatever they want whenever they want, and they don't realize. I mean, being self-employed, you do have a lot of freedom, but you also
Hmm.
do a lot of hard work,
Yeah.
and you're just not stuck from a 9 to 5 position and then go home and not think about anything. When you're self-employed, you think about your business all the time,
Yeah, that's so true.
and you do have freedom to do things, but you don't have freedom to do everything, like a
Yeah.
lot of people think. And I think the one of the big misconceptions is that they get to write off everything. There is a lot
Hmm.
of things you get to write off, but I find a lot of them taking bookkeeping is probably the biggest. They think at the end of the year they can just add up everything, and they miss out on so much by not keeping track of everything every month. Wait until the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a really important point to actually be on track of it during the year and to be keeping a record. That's a really good point.
Right, right. Because you'll be surprised how much you'll miss and you don't see, and because you're busy with so many other things.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important to have bookkeeping habits, have some good habits, and if you can do it weekly, that's probably the best to know. Because you want to know if your business is making money, because you can have money in the bank and your business really isn't making money. It's just a constant turnaround,
Yeah.
and so you want to be on top of that.
What are some good bookkeeping habits that you would recommend?
I would recommend every week reconciling your bank accounts and seeing where all
Okay.
your money's going, at least
Yes.
every week. I know that. So if you want to have a good business, you need to have good habits and good
Yes.
systems. Those are the two things. And read. You should read a lot of financial books on your type of business that you're in, and keep on top of things because things change constantly.
That's so true.
and
Yeah.
and even ways of bookkeeping and all that. There's lots of different ways. There's lots of different apps, lots of different programs, and one may work for one person good, but it may not work for somebody else. So you just got to go out there, and until you get your hands on, you're not going to find which one works best for you.
Okay. That's good
Yeah,
advice.
yeah.
And
So
how many years have you had your business?
since 1991,
It's a
so
long
what's that?
time. Yeah.
Yeah, like what's 33 years now.
Yeah. So I'm sure like you've just had a lot of experience even operating your own business. Like what is some of the advice that or some of the things that you've learned just through having your own business?
I learned that things change
Yeah.
constantly, and you need to be on top of it and ask lots of questions.
Okay.
I learned a lot about taxes by going on audits with IRS, and I had a lot
Ah,
of agents teach me a lot of things. They showed me a lot of things that were very important. So there's nobody you need to be afraid of. You shouldn't be afraid of IRS. They're just people like you and I. That's what I've learned.
yeah.
Because I hear that them, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. And I've never ever seen anybody go to jail. The worst thing that's ever happened is they had to pay a fine. That's the
Mm,
worst thing that's it. And they rather just collect money from you anyways. But it's always been something reasonable. There it's and people will work with you. You shouldn't have fear in anything, but always ask lots of questions,
yeah.
and you'll learn. God, you
Yeah.
have to constantly be learning.
That's so true. I think learning is a vital skill for entrepreneurs.
Yes,
And
yes.
yes. Yeah. And if someone were to work with you or a tax preparer, like what paperwork do they need to already have like kind of like ready to like give you?
For me to prepare a tax return.
Yes.
Okay, so usually I send out a checklist,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have to have the main things. I have to have some kind of ID to prove
Mm-hmm.
for identity because there's a lot of identity theft. So I have to put in that information in the computer, and obviously their social security number and their current address.
Mm-hmm.
I find that because I do a lot of uh, my taxes online, people are emailing me and they forget to tell me they moved. And so I have an old address on there. And then, it's just keeping up to date with everything.
Okay.
That's the main thing. Making sure I report all the income.
Yeah.
Because if I miss something and they forget, oh, I forgot I worked for this company and I got a 1099 from them, or I got a W-2. It's only $400. Do I have to report it? And it's like, if you have other income, yes, you have to report it. So it's just keeping track of all that.
Yeah, that's a actually you just made me think of another question. So like when you work for somebody else or a company, actually can you kind of tell us like just explain to the audience like what a 1099 and W-2 is and then also what is the I guess the minimum amount you have to make to report it?
Okay. So a 1099 is when you're self-employed
Hmm.
and you are a subcontractor, which means they take out no taxes. You're responsible for your own taxes, which is
Yes.
good because now that you're self-employed, you get to write off expenses like your mileage, your cell phone, your, whatever for
Hmm.
you to make that money. And it has to, you're not required to send out a 1099 unless it's $600 or more.
Okay.
So that's when you should be getting a 1099. And then with the W-2, you're an employee, so you don't worry about anything, but you don't get to write off anything either. Your employer takes out your taxes. The only thing you have to make sure is that they take out the correct amount.
Okay.
Uh, because some people they're single with no kids and they're saying, "Oh, I don't, I'm head of household," because they've misunderstood. Head of household means that you take care of a child. It doesn't mean because you support yourself. So,
Oh, okay.
so if you check head of household and you're just single, they're not going to take out enough taxes. So you're going to owe at the end of the year. If you're
Oh,
head of
okay.
household, which means you support somebody, they're going to take out less taxes because then you got a deduction
Gotcha.
for that. But that's probably one of the big. A lot of single people think, "Oh, I support myself. I'm head of household," but that's not how it's. You're single
Okay,
if
so
you
it's
just
actually
support
if you have a
yourself.
child or something. Okay, that's
Right.
good to know.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
feel like whenever I would get employed and then they give you the form to fill out, it's kind of like, wait, what do I check?
Yeah, no, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And like I said, that's probably about the one that's the biggest misconception. And single is the worst because they figure that you should pay for everybody else. So they tax you the most.
okay. That's,
Fair. It's not fair, it's
yeah,
not right, but that's their rules.
gotcha.
So and that's the other thing is there's a lot of things that I don't think is fair or right, but I don't make the rules. All I can do is tell you what they are and tell you how
Yeah,
much you owe for it because of them.
yeah. And then also, can you mention what is a W-9?
Okay, so a W-9 is the form, is if that means that you're a sole proprietor. So
Okay.
nobody can give you a 1099 without filling out the W-9. And so
Okay.
sometimes people will hire other people to work for them, and then at the end of the year they go, "Oh, you're self-employed. I need you to fill out the W-9." And they'll say, "No, I'm not filling it out because I don't want to report it." It's very important to have that W-9 filled out before you do any subcontract work with anybody, even if you plan on paying them less than 600, because they may come back later on and work more for you. So that $600 is for the whole year, not just one job.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's better to get that W-9 first before
Okay.
you any subcontractors. That protects you because if at the end of the year you're trying to get them to sign it, and I see this happen all the time, people say, "No, I'm not filling it out because I don't want to report that tax."
Oh,
And you can't
interesting.
make them fill it out. It's too late.
Okay. So you got to get that form from them when you first hire them and have them working for you.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience that I have not asked you?
I would say the most important thing is keep good records
Hmm.
and to do it weekly if possible, if not monthly. And always ask questions and educate yourself because things change constantly. Businesses are so different now than they were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And the tax forms are so much more complicated now than they were 30 years ago. I'm required to go to school every year because the tax forms change every year.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, so that's why I have to go to school a minimum 20 hours every year, and I have to take a test with IRS to make sure I'm proficient with their new forms. But it does
Wow.
change every year. Sometimes it's just a little bit, sometimes it's a lot of it. I think the main thing is having good records and there's a lot of YouTubes on teaching you how to do bookkeeping and all that stuff. A lot of free YouTubes that you can do.
Hmm.
That's or look getting some kind of education, but keeping track of the bookwork, that's the I would say the number one thing is the bookkeeping part. And I have some clients that are really good at what they do and they're not good at their bookkeeping part. And it takes away from their business. It really does.
Gotcha.
you shouldn't be a business owner if you don't know where you are financially.
It's good to know. That's really good. And where can people find more about you if they're interested in working with you and they want to hire you to do their taxes? Where can they find you?
Okay, well, I do have a website, Rachelle'sTaxService.com. So they can always go on the website and get my phone number, my email, and email me. Or they can just email me. It's probably the easiest way is just sending me an email, which is Rachelle'sTaxService@hotmail.com.
Awesome. And that'll be in the show notes. Rachelle, thank you so much for being on today and just for sharing all of your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. It was a privilege. It was a privilege. So thank you.
Hey, friends, if you've been enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you wrote a review. If you're listening from Apple Podcasts, you can scroll down to Ratings and Review and click on Write a Review to leave one. So many of you have shared kind words with me, and it would mean so much to me if others could see them. Also, if you feel like this podcast could bless someone you know, please share it with them. Thank you so much. The show notes for today's episode are available on my blog at yourcreativeforce.com, as well as other resources and inspiration to go after your dreams.